So thanks everyone for coming to the talk. Really quick, before I begin, I just want to say, if you look in the program, you'll notice there should be 2 of us. However, there was a family obligation that Brian was unable to make it here for. As such, I just want to caveat this entire deck with if any of the material is boring, if any of it's factually inaccurate, if anything's bad, that was his slides and his material. All of the funny cat pictures, those were all me. Anything that's valuable, that was all me, right? All right, cool. So as long as we're clear on that. So first off, who am I? So my name's Nat Hirsch. I run the red team. So what we do on the red team is really what I like to describe as advanced objective-based adversarial emulation. So it's a mouthful, but what does that mean? That means we do what the bad guys do. So a bad guy doesn't necessarily care if your systems are patched or not. That's just a means to an end. A bad guy's going to try to do something, gaining access, issuing fraudulent wire transfers, stealing sensitive customer data, exfiltrating that data. So again, on the red team, what we do is we emulate bad guys. And we do this to demonstrate the impact, excuse me, and to better understand the risks that are available to the organization. So it means something really meaningless if you talk to an executive and you say, hey, your systems have security misconfigurations. However, if you tell them, because of these misconfigurations, we're able to transfer money out of the general ledger account, and this week you won't be able to hit payroll. That all of a sudden really, really gets them, and that means something. So that's primarily what we do on the red team. Now, one of the other things that we do, which I would actually argue is even more important, is we act as a sparring partner for the blue teams. So the blue teams inside the organization, those are the prize fighters. They're the ones who are actually going up against the bad guys. They're the ones who are going to go boxing with Ivan Drago, not us. So we want to make sure that their muscles are engaged and that they have the exercise in order to actually fight Ivan Drago and actually win and not just be Clubber Lang. So to do this, we have a program that we've affectionately called Catfish. So what is a catfish? First, let's go over what it's not. So we're not talking about phishing. So if you came to this talk because you wanted to learn all the newest hotness about how you can get your malware embedded into a Word document or a PDF or whatever and get that on your victims' machines, wrong talk, sorry. Door's right there. I'm sure there's another one that you can go to. We're also not talking about MTV catfishing. So if you want to learn how to pretend that you're a hot, attractive 16-year-old girl to get money out of lonely rich men, again, sorry, not the right talk for you. Might be able to find that somewhere else. What catfishes are very tool and technique-focused operations. As opposed to the objective ones that I mentioned before, where we're doing the thing, here we're only doing the technique. So think things like lateral movement, beaconing networking traffic, malware on a machine, individual things. So there's some talk from MITRE, from things like that. So think the MITRE attack framework, the individual cells. Can we do this individual cell? What happens if this gets done? So that's really what we're doing. And again, the focus here is on the detection side of it, not the is it possible. So yes, we can do lateral movement. We don't care that we can do it. We want to know, can this be detected? Is an alert going to be generated in the SOC? Is an analyst going to do something with it? So now, the obvious question that most of you may or may not be thinking is, that sounds great. Why is it called a catfish? That makes no sense. So for that to make sense, you kind of have to go back in time a little bit. Way back in the day, people used to really love cod, the fish. And what they would do is they would tell their fishermen, go out, get us all the cod that you can. The fishermen would go in their boats, go out into the sea, and they would go fish for a ton of cod. They would take it, put the cod inside a barrel, bring that barrel back into port, and give that cod to the people. And the people said, this is gross. These cod are mealy and mushy and miserable, and we don't like this. Not even the people up in Boston like those cod. Consequently, the fishermen had to figure out a way of addressing this. So what they would do is when they would go out and they would go fishing, they would take all the cod, put it in a barrel, and then take one catfish and put that catfish inside the barrel. And what that catfish would do is whenever the cod would stop swimming, go and nip at its fins and just poke it. Wouldn't hurt the cod, wouldn't kill the cod, but it would just annoy them enough that the cod would swim away, keeping its muscles engaged, keeping it strong, and keeping it fresh. So when it made it all the way back to Boston, the folks could say, hey, This cod is delicious. We love cod. We're in Boston. Yay, cod. So that's what we do. We're that catfish. The blue teams are the cod, and we're the catfish. So we just kind of poke at them. We're not trying to kill them. We're not trying to beat them. We're not trying to do anything other than just annoy them enough to get their muscles to move and go that full spectrum. So this way that when they do go and fight Ivan Drago, they're strong like Rocky, they're not weak like Clubber Lang. So the name of the talk, though, was Building a Better Catfish. So that implies that there was a catfish beforehand that could be improved upon. So before we get into the new way, let's kind of go over the old way a little bit. So what we used to do is at the beginning of the year, we would work with members of the blue team. We would come up with a list of things that we want to test. We would then, at some point in time during the year, do those tests. It would get caught or it wouldn't get caught. We would write up a report. We would give the report to the members of the blue team. They would take it, they would read it and say, fuck you very much, this is great. They would put it on with the other things that they have to do, and maybe they fix something, maybe they don't. No real learning, no real improvements, nothing really kind of worked forward with it. So let me give an example of this. So we did one where we said, hey, you know what, we're going to really aggressively hit the external perimeter. And then based off of this, we should see some fireworks, right? Because, I mean, like, we're really hammering the perimeter. So we did, and there was really no fireworks. No one really cared. There was no alerts. So we went and we're like, well, you should care about this. And they said, well, we have the logs. We can see it, but there's no alerts. And here's why there's no alerts. Because that happens every single day, all the time. The internet's horrible. Like, you're being attacked all the time, and nothing that you did broke through the perimeter, so we don't care. So we're not going to alert upon this. Maybe at some point in the future we will, if we have everything else addressed, but there's so many other things that are higher priority right now that this is just, there's not much value in us doing this right now. So thank you, but no thank you. So I don't want to leave you with the impression at this point, though, that this program was an entire failure. We actually, I would argue, had more successes than failures like this. And let me give you an example of one of the successes that we had. So we have these rogue access detection things all over the buildings. So now this way you create your rogue access device, and then all of a sudden an alert gets generated, and they go in and they say, hey, you're not supposed to do that, and they steal your Linksys router or whatever, and then everyone's happy. So we wanted to test, could we bypass this? Can we actually get around this? And is this actually working? So we went, created a bunch of rogue access points, trying to do some like evil twin style attacks. And in building one, sure enough, alerted. And we got to one of the buildings, and there was no alerts. Nothing happened. It was weird. So we kind of said, well, why is this building so special? Why is nothing happening here? And it turns out that the devices were in this weird horked state because of some power flux thing. So they were reporting that they were alive, but they weren't sending any data into the log aggregators. So there was nowhere for those alerts to actually be actioned or to be viewed upon. So then they said, wow, this is a problem. They fixed that. They rebooted them. They reconfigured them. And we test again. Sure enough, there was alerting, and kind of everyone's happy. And this was really kind of a little eye-opening. So there was a little genesis there that was different from the previous one. And that was the conversation. Hey, why did this not work the way that we expected it to work? Let's look at that. Let's work together. And that kind of little genesis, that little kernel, is really what led into the new way. So let me talk a little bit about the new way of doing things. So we're much, much more coordinated, much more hand in hand. So we'll partner up with a member of the blue team, particularly like a director level, and say, what are the things that you're trying to solve? What are the things that you're looking at accomplishing? We would then clearly define what the objectives would be, and then what the expected outcomes would be. So we're going to do this. This alert should fire. Test it. Did that alert fire? Yes? Awesome. Is there ways with which we could bypass that alert? If so, let's try those, and let's make that alert better. If it did not fire, why didn't it fire? Do we not have the logs? Is the alert misconfigured? Is the device not recording it? What's going on there? Let's fix that. Let's make that a little bit better. Let's try it again. And some of the nice things that you can get from this is actually metrics, because you test it, alert happened, response happened. How long? How quickly did that go? Can we get that shorter? Can we get that shorter? Can we get that shorter? So let me give an actual example of this. So here's a simple one that we did around lateral movement. So you take a standard image, you do a lateral movement technique to get into it. What it is doesn't matter. You know, we'll say PSExec or WinRM or AT, it doesn't really matter. But you define with that one, you hit the box, and you expect the alert because we have all this alerting for it. But that alert didn't happen. So why didn't that alert happen? Well, now let's hit a new box that's configured to log everything to the millionth degree. So sysmon and OS query turned up to 11. All of the Windows event logs, all of the Windows security logs, every single possible thing that you can have logging, log on that machine. See what's going to happen when you connect into it. Now you have all of that data. So you have a big haystack that you can actually start looking for that needle and say, okay, so if we do this, this should be that lateral movement because this is the things that we saw when we connected in. Let's try configuring that for an alert. Boom, we did that. Oh, what do you know? That happens every time anyone logs in, so that's not really effective. That's going to cause far too many alerts, not enough actual bad. So let's retune it again. Let's find it down until you can get it to it's just the one thing that you're looking for, and then test it again. Yep, it works. The alert happened. Great. Now let's push that out across the enterprise to all the machines. So now when there's lateral movement or a particular form of lateral movement that we solved for here happening in the environment, immediate alert, immediately going for it. So this is kind of a really simple one. Let me give you an example of one of the more complex, full spectrum ones that we did. So in this one, we really wanted to test top to bottom a full operation. We wanted to see what happens when there's a compromised host talking to a known bad guy doing known bad. So the first thing that we did is we compromised a host, and then we beacon out traffic. Doesn't matter what it is, it's just some unknown C2 to an unknown host. So this shouldn't alert anyone because it's basically just some machine making HTTPS traffic. Happens all the time. There's no reason to think that this is bad. So then the next thing that happens is we generate some threat intelligence. So we take some IOCs, some IPs, some hashes, things along those lines, put those into the threat intelligence feed, say that there's a bad actor, fuzzy bunny, whatever. They're really interested in the company. We're going to now do that. And those hashes and those IPs point to the ones that we controlled. So then we send that data back out again. We start beaconing out. So now we're talking to a known bad guy as opposed to just some unknown. So this should alert because, hey, one of our machines is talking to a bad guy who's interested in our environment. Next thing that we will do is take that compromised host and move laterally, something we know that they can detect, to a high-value target. So think of critical back-end database, wire machines, things that there's really a greater eye on. We then take whatever data would be there and generate some mock data from that. So we're not actually sending out customer information, but we're just going to generate a bunch of fake 123, 12, 1234 social security numbers belonging to John Doe and so forth and so on, and send that out to a different IP address. Because that first one should have already been blocked, but now we have a known bad guy, or a machine that has been touched by a known bad guy, now sending out a little bit of data. Should stagger some alerts. And then the next stage is to send out an Equifaxian amount of data. So if we sent out one, now let's send out all. So we send out gigs and gigs and gigs and gigs of data. Okay? And then do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And every single time monitoring where it's getting caught, where it's getting alerted. So jumping the gun a little bit as to what we saw is we ran this around 20 times. And surprisingly, the very first time we ran it, we went all the way start to finish without a single alert, nothing detecting. It's terrifying. We identified massive gaps that we didn't know that we had, one of which was our threat intelligence feed. When that data would then go into the alert queue, only 1,000 entries were being transferred over. So this wasn't the first 1,000, this wasn't the last 1,000, this was just a random 1,000. So if you're a bad guy and you got incredibly unlucky, maybe they would see that. Maybe you would be caught because you're in that 1,000. But chances are you wouldn't. So we identified this. We brought it to the engineering team. We brought it to the development teams. They managed to figure out exactly what the issue was, why it was happening, where the bottleneck was, and managed to actually address it. So now, all of a sudden, all of that in threat intelligence going into the alert queue, automatically alerting on things, and we started seeing really actionable items. We also found gaps with inside DLP that we thought this was types of thing was being monitored, but turns out it wasn't. This we thought was being decrypted, and it wasn't. So we were able to identify and close those and get it down. So this way, by the time that we finished this, we were able to get detection and alerting and eradication and containment and all of those fancy words done in a really, really short period of time at each one of those individual phases. So, but there's still areas that can be improved. So first and foremost, it's easy to cheat. It's also pretty informal in how we've done this. And even though that last one was really wide spectrum, it's still very narrow focused in that it's really only focused on the SOC and the alerts that are being generated at the SOC. And it's also really manual. So what did we do to kind of address these? Well, first, it's easy to cheat. How do I mean it's easy to cheat? Well, let's imagine the scenario here. We have the victim. Victim's talking to the unknown bad guys at this point. Just some traffic that's there, but we know that, hey, there's a bad guy. Victim's talking to them. First thing the SOC analyst is going to do is say, okay, who else is talking to this machine? Oh, what do you know? A red team guy is talking to this machine. Well, guess what? This is a red team operation, and I don't need to do anything else. So now the problem with that is, although great, you caught the red team, you exercised the first part of your muscles, you didn't follow through. You didn't do the rest of it. There was none of the investigation. There was none of the eradication. There was none of the follow-through that was there. So now when it comes to Ivan Drago, yeah, you'll be able to hold up on round 1, but round 2, you're getting your ass kicked. We don't want that to happen. So how do we address this? Well, it's kind of a simple solution. As opposed to now us talking to the C2, what we do is we kind of split that up. So the victim talks to one machine, that machine talks to another machine that we control, and we only talk to that bottom controller. So now we're kind of looping through. So there's nowhere for there to be, hey, we're talking to the same machine. Clearly, this is the same adversary, so this is clearly the red team. And this can be either in the same IP space or in different IP space, different providers. So the top unknown bad guy will say, that could be in DigitalOcean. The controller could be on some mom and pop VPC that's being offered out there, or one of the free services or whatever the case is. It really doesn't matter where they are. The whole point is just that there's the two different ones so you can't see the correlation behind them. Next, it's kind of an informal process. A lot of these things came out of side-of-desk conversations. Me talking with another director, saying, hey, what are you trying to solve for? What are you trying to do? How can we help you? So we want to kind of make this a little bit more structured. So GitHub to the rescue for this. So with GitHub, you can have issues. So we create a repo, and then we have open issues. You have an alert that you want to test. You create an issue saying, here's the alert, here's the details around the alert, and then we can go and look at that and say, yep, we can test this. Here's when we tested it. Here's the IP address we tested it from. Did you see the alert? Yes, we did. Awesome. No, we didn't. Let's fix it. And kind of walking from that way. So now we have data that's coming in. We can see how many requests we're getting. We can see what the appetite is. And we can see metrics. Hey, it takes on average 40 hours of work from there being an alert needing to be tested until when that's fully completed and tested. Are we comfortable with that? Do we need to shrink that? Can we expand that? Where can we go? So this way we at least have some nice metrics that we can run with. Next, narrow focus. So we want to expand it. We want to get that really big, long cat. So right now we're kind of really just testing SOC alerts. Well, insider threat generates a bunch of alerts. Engineering has a bunch of things that we could probably help test with. Really, any group that is doing any detective work out of an alert queue or anything that's going to check to see whether or not logs are there or anything like that, we can help with. We can come in, we can do whatever testing is necessary for that, generate those artifacts, generate those IOCs, and see if they get caught or see if they get logged or see if they get alerted upon. This can also be expanded out to like simulation teams. So we did X, let's now simulate it and let's go further with a tabletop exercise and see where we can go with this in order to get this in front of the executives. Some other examples that we could do. As I mentioned at the beginning, the rogue access points. So there's a lot more that you can do with rogue access points other than just having them exist. What if I connect into an iPhone? What if I connect into here? Will it detect those? Will it see that? Lateral movement. There is a trillion forms of lateral movement. We talked WMI, WinRM, AT. I just read not too long ago that Windows 10 now has SSH by default. I guarantee you that's going to be a fun one. Insider threat profiles, right? So guess what? You're fired in a couple of weeks. I know this, you don't know this, so we're going to start monitoring you in order to make sure that you're not doing anything you're not supposed to be doing, like stealing company data and the like. So you know what? Fire me. Put me on that list, and I will try to exfiltrate as much data as I can. Can I do it, or is it getting caught? If it's getting caught, can I get past it? If it's not getting caught, what do we do, or what do we need to do in order to catch those types of things? Hunting for prior operations. So I mentioned that we do objective-based ops, going after doing fraudulent wire, stealing sensitive data, etc. Each one of those is going to have TTPs that we're using. We can give our report to the hunt teams and say, here's everything that we did. Go find it. See if there's the artifacts on those machines. See if there's that data there in order to recreate what we did, and see if you can build alerts based off of those actions. The other problem is it's still too manual. Really difficult to do things that are manual, very time-consuming, and very challenging. So how do we really kind of get around that? Well, it's kind of straightforward. Automate everything that you can. So Chris Gates over at Uber, Carnal Ownage, if you don't follow his blog, released a tool called Meta. Basically, you can kind of create a bunch of individual MITRE attack things and have it executed automatically. It runs that, and then you can kind of get those alerts. So those basic level things you can do there. There's a bunch of commercial offerings that are in this space now. So Veridin, Attack IQ, and I think there's like 15 other ones. I get calls from them every day. Custom scripts. So one of the first ones that we did with this was a simple Metasploit RC file that just had 12 different types of lateral movement, ran through those, list of hosts at random, connected in, and then did some stuff on those machines. Easy enough. You can do the same thing with aggressor scripts in Cobalt Strike or whatever framework that you have. So really anywhere where you can kind of automate these things, that's where you want to go with this. And there's some really nice benefits that you can get from this as well. So now the red team comes in, does the thing, generates an automated script to automate it. You can now have that running all the time, and those alerts going into a whitelist. So now, at the end of the day, the SOC analyst manager or whoever can look at that whitelist and say, I'm expecting to see 10 alerts in here. I see 10 alerts. Awesome. We're good. Or they can say, you know what? I only see 9 alerts in here. That one lateral movement that used to alert yesterday is not alerting today. What happened? What network change happened that this is no longer happening? Okay. So that's all great, but we're not done. We're taking this thing to space. We're going further. So what do I want to do with this? Well, first, I think everything should be a catfish, right? So I mentioned a couple of times that we do objective-based operations, right? That we issue wire transfers, that we steal sensitive data, that we modify loans, that we do all of that fun stuff. Well, in order to do that, we have to be using TTPs. We have tools, techniques, and procedures that we're using, that we're doing. So why don't we just kind of try to catfish around those? So let's meet with a member of the blue team, go full open kimono, Say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to try to break into the environment. We're probably going to come in via phishing. We're going to have a weaponized PDF that we're going to use. We're then going to go laterally through the environment, leveraging WinRM. We're going to try to find a database, and then we're going to make a modification inside that database. Where in that step should there be alerting? What alerts should be generated? And then when we do it, when we cross those thresholds, reach out to them and say, hey, we just did this. Did that alert happen? No. Okay, well, why not? And let's spin up a small catfish around that. Or, yes, it did. Awesome. Did you eradicate? No. Well, why not? Let's kind of work around that. Also, partnering with different blue teams. I kind of mentioned this a little bit before. There is a lot of different groups that have some form of detective or preventative measures that they're doing. So think fraud. Fraud's not necessarily technical, but they will be monitoring for certain things. Can we do something where we're testing fraud, where we're partnering with them to do this? And then lastly, it's probably hard to see because it's on the bottom here, automate all the things. I kind of mentioned this before, but doing these things does take away from our day-to-day operations. And if we're doing these all the time, then that becomes all that we're doing. So where we can automate, we need to automate. We need to write scripts. We need to do things in order to make the manual labor part of this easier. So great. Sounds like a great program. Awesome. Everyone's going to go back to their office and they're going to say, we need to set up catfishes. Great, I love it. Some things to consider beforehand, some things that we've learned. First and foremost, OPSEC's important. So really you need to keep the communication of the planning and the execution to as small a group as possible. And it really needs to be the people that are not the ones that are actually going to be tested. So if I know that a malicious action is going to be happening in the environment, I'm going to behave differently than if I don't know. And we want to make sure that the tools and that the people and the procedures that are being followed are the ones that are actually followed. So in our organization, we tend to find that the Director Plus community is a good community for this. And no offense to any directors that are in the room, that's because we at the director level don't actually do work. The work is being done by those that are working below us with a hands-on keyboard. So this way we can kind of talk about, here's the plan, we're going to have this be executed. Expect one of your analysts to start jumping up and down saying, we think there's bad in the environment, let them run through it, and then, hey, this was a catfish type operation. Clearly defined objectives and expected results. This, I think, is one of the most important components of this. The catfishes that we did that were the biggest meh and the biggest letdowns in terms of results were ones where we didn't have clearly defined actions and clearly expected results of those actions. So this way where we can say, we're going to do this lateral movement, we expect this alert to fire, we do it, that alert fires or that alert doesn't fire, and then we can do actions based upon that. When it's just, hey, we expect there to be some outcome because we're doing some malicious action, those tend to not really result in any meaningful actions or results from the participants. Both formal and informal communication are incredibly important. Formal, I talked about the GitHub repo, so this way that you can track the requests coming in and their actions and the outputs from them. Those are really good because it shows the story of what you guys are doing together, and it also allows you to kind of track and generate metrics and kind of data points for leadership for it. Informal, those communications are just as important. The side of desk, we did this, did you see this? The immediate back and forth is where the actual work gets done. That's where the actual value becomes driven. Okay? The next thing is that your assumptions are always wrong. Always. 100% of the time, you're always wrong. This is on both the red team side and on the blue team sides. The red teams tend to think that the blue teams have these magic detection things that can say, hey, you're going to see one anomalous packet out of a million, and based off of that, you should be able to tell that there's bad going on, and you should be able to do all these crazy fancy things. And the truth is they can't. And the blue teams think the red teams just do exploits and just do the fancy news things, and we don't. So you really need to work together to say, this is what we can do, this is what we do, and here's where we kind of see what's going on one way or the other way on it. Next, keeping it internal. So one of the things that was a real problem, or not problem, but we'll say area for improvement in the previous state was around the report that we would generate and that we would hand over to the blue team, where we would say, here's all the things you did wrong. That report also managed to get its way up high, which would be problematic because now all of a sudden we're calling the baby ugly, they look bad, nobody likes that. So instead, no really reporting, everything is internal, we're working together. And then once we've solved the problem, say lateral movement, we can then say together, write a quick report, and then hand that up to leadership. So now, instead of it being, these guys suck at their job, it's, look at what we did together. Together, we managed to solve the ability to detect this thing that we thought we could detect, but we couldn't because of technical limitations. So you're already giving a feel-good story, and nobody's feelings are hurts with it. And the last one is really testing the things that people care about. So this may seem kind of counterintuitive, but people actually have their own objectives. They have their own things that they're trying to solve, and you want to help them do those things. So normally on the red team, you always think if you're the adversary, you're the bad guy, and you're trying to circumvent those things. But instead, let's think, hey, what are you trying to solve? What are the problems you have? How can we provide you the ammunition? How can we help you do that? What can we give you to test? And those might not be the most elite things. They may not be the sexiest things. They may not be the coolest things. But those are the things that are actually going to get done. And you know what? After you've done those kind of boring, rote things, then you can start doing the more neat and sexy things, because by that point in time, you've already bridged a strong relationship between the two different teams. And then you can say, hey, look, I scratched your back on doing this. I think this is a real big problem. We can do this and get real access to the environment. Let's try to solve for this one now. Okay. So that kind of really covers, I guess, at a high level, everything that we had. Like I said, I had another presenter with me, which would have drawn this out a little bit. But questions? And yes, I found all of these pictures on the internet. They are beautiful. All right. Well, then I'll be here all day. If there's any other questions or anything like that, or you want to get more specific details on the individual TTPs or the program or anything like that, just grab me. I'll be happy to chew your ear off. All right. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the con.